Do you have any idea how reckless that was? Foster shouted. You might be able to fight off a dozen or so werewolves, but I ain't. What would have happened if all of them would have attacked at once? Could you have protected me? I mean, I'm a good fighter and all, but a dozen or so werewolves seems like a bit more to bite off to chew than I'm used to dealing with. They may be weak in comparison to you, but they can hurt me just fine. Perhaps you could think about things just a little bit more next time. Maybe don't serve me up on a silver platter. Calm yourself, you would have been fine. I assure you, I am far more than a one-trick pony, Hamilton replied. I'm more than capable of protecting you and killing them. Being able to release my soul from my body is far from my only skill. I did not reach where I am today by simply relying on the natural abilities I was given. I developed much more than enough to ensure my own safety, and for the time being yours as well. Don't worry so much. It'll make you get wrinkles. Yeah, wrinkles are what I'm worried about, Foster replied. High-level demons think they own the world. This mission is gonna get me killed. I can tell. I can just see it now. Well, I suppose it's over and done with now. So I'd rather not hang around to find out if those guys are going to come back. So I say we move forward and get out of their territory before they decide to come back with maybe even more of them. For all we know, that was a single hunting party or something like that. We don't know how many of them there are out in the woods. Wolves and demons don't exactly communicate that much. So I don't have a read on their numbers or how well organized they can be. I don't even know who you just killed. For all I know, he was somebody important. Baloney, Hamilton replied scoffingly, quaffing his hair a bit, running his fingers through it, straightening it back. I assure you I know about wolf society, and those peons were no one. His death will not be lamented by his superiors, and the only other alternative is that that individual was the superior. Which only makes me believe that the wolves in this world are so much weaker than the ones in the demon realm. Rexall Afera, now that's a werewolf. I mean, I can't stand him. I hate his guts. Every time I see him, I want to kill him. But his power as a wolf is unmistakable. As it should be. He does rule one of the 4 largest kingdoms in the demon realm. A man not to be trifled with. Yeah, they're not powerful wolves. But let's keep moving regardless, Foster said, getting behind Hamilton and beginning to push him forward. Remember, it was your idea. We have to move fast, right? We're in a rush. We have a mission to do. No need to hang around here. Yes, of course, he said, as he started to make pace, moving of his own accord, and Foster now beginning to walk alongside him. However, as they continued their journey together, Foster found herself thinking over that interaction, wondering about the nature of Hamilton, his abilities, what else he might be able to do. Exactly how powerful is Hamilton Fletch? She asked herself as she peered over at him, casually strolling through the woods just as before, hands tucked into his pockets, looking as if he didn't have a care in the world, but still maintaining that emotionless expression of his. So, let me ask you something, Foster said. That thing you can do, where you let your soul out of your body. Your creepy undead soul. Ugh, Foster said, shivering. It still gives me the willies. How exactly are you able to do that and, well, still move and talk? I mean, I thought your soul was necessary for stuff like that. How is it that you're able to be active? Isn't your soul essentially you? For most people, yes. One's soul and one's consciousness are one and the same for almost everyone, with very few exceptions, like us wraiths. But functionally, as far as how I'm able to stay active and remain myself whilst my soul isn't in my body, is, well, complex. Quite frankly, our spirits and bodies are comprised differently than that of a normal person or entity. With normal beings, a spirit, a soul, is comprised of two elements, form and core. With most, these two elements are inseparable. The core, which is the essence of you, you could say it's the engine that powers your soul's heart, so to speak. It's what creates the spiritual power that keeps your soul in balance. All living beings have a spiritual core. You in fact have many cores, each serving its own function within your body, your life. You have your emotional core, your spiritual core, your mental core. It's a system of interaction, each one of them collecting the energies that your life produces, maintaining them throughout your body. When one dies, their soul does not maintain its spiritual core. They lose it, and thus become ghosts. That is, if they choose to remain here in this world, refusing to let go of the life that they left behind. There are many different things that can happen to a spirit once it dies and decides to stay here in the world of the living. Sometimes the lack of a spiritual core has very negative repercussions on the soul itself. You see, souls, ghosts, as you might call them, might be dead, but they still have requirements. Much like many living beings, they require energy. A soul doesn't just sustain of its own accord in order to continue to exist. Without a spiritual core, that spirit must find a source, something from which to draw the energy necessary for its existence. This will eventually lead to negative consequences if not done. Basically, the longer that a soul goes without utilizing something to feed its spiritual form, then the spiritual form itself rots away, and the elements of their humanity that once existed go along with it. Memories, intelligence, understanding, reason, emotion, all of them will begin to fade away with time, as an ever-increasing hunger will grow within the spirit. A spirit that does not replace the energy provided by the spiritual core that they lost upon death will eventually become a wraith. A natural one, not a demonic one. There are two types, of course. Demon wraiths, like myself, are living beings with dead souls, but a natural wraith is solely a spirit, someone who has passed from the world of the living and yet still clings to it, but is unable to satisfy the requirements, and so they devolve, becoming monstrous entities without thought or reason. Basically monsters. They seek to do only one thing after that point: consume, to feed that lack of a core that exists within them. And to do so, they seek the lives of the living, draining away their essence in order to sate the ravenous hunger that now consumes them. In order to prevent this fate, those who stay in the realm of the living after their death must find a way to sate that before they devolve, lose their humanity. There are several ways they can go about it. Option 1 is known as binding. This is when a spirit binds itself to a place, what you might call haunting. They bind themselves to a house, a forest, a stone or fixed structure of some kind. Basically, they find a place and then bind themselves to it, slowly sapping the energy from the environment itself that surrounds it in order to satiate it, fill the void that's created in death. This is why most spirits haunt specific locations. They do not journey or travel in most cases. This is the easiest and most effective way for a spirit to maintain itself, without the necessity of doing harm to others or other more difficult measures. The second measure that a spirit can take is known as the hunt. This one is, in essence, very simple. Rather than binding themselves to a specific location and feeding off of the energy that exists there, they choose not to bind themselves to anything, becoming a wandering soul. But in order to do this, they must still have the spiritual energy required to continue to exist. So, if you're wondering where they get it, well, it's from other spirits. They become predators, hunting the dead, killing the dead. They destroy other spirits and absorb their essence into themselves. In doing so, gaining their spiritual essence, using it to replace the hole that was created upon death. And the last one is known as the poltergeist. This is, in essence, the hunt. Just instead of spirits, they hunt the living. They target living individuals and then haunt them. They bring about pain and suffering in the lives of the living. And in doing so, those living beings create energy. Energy which the ghost then can feed upon in order to satiate the core, or the lack of it. They feed on the living in order to continue to exist. Some do this in a very measured way, over time. Some even defer away from negative into the positive. Rather than causing distress, they might bring aid or joy, provide protection or guardianship to the living. Sometimes binding themselves to families, bloodlines, individuals, becoming somewhat of a guardian spirit. And as that person lives, they draw small amounts of the energy that they need to sustain themselves from an individual or their descendants. It doesn't really matter which. There are many people who have guardian spirits, souls that for whatever their reason have decided to watch over the living, to protect them from things either living or dead. Most people don't even realize it's happening, don't understand why or how things happen, they just do. And yet there are countless stories of things that people would consider coincidence that are actually attributed to the spirits that wander in the world of the living. Stories of people feeling as if they were pushed into dangerous situations, walking along a rocky cliffside and suddenly feeling as if they were pushed, almost falling off. When someone dies and fades from the world of the living, the energy produced by their spiritual core separating from their soul still remains for a moment. So, when a ghost kills a living person, they can feed on the energy. But so too does the protection work in the same way, just without the necessity to kill them. They're merely protecting their investment. When they cling to a soul of a living person and protect them, as I said, they can continue to siphon small amounts of energy to continue existing. There are stories of this as well, that people, regard as happenstance, random occurrences, blind luck even. Someone walking down a road, not realizing that there's a horse and cart racing rapidly across it. Their attention is diverted. They don't see the danger coming, so they keep walking. And yet suddenly, something seemingly innocuous happens. They feel as if their foot gets stuck. And as they stop for a moment to see what their shoe is stuck in, maybe a hole or something of that nature, maybe their shoelaces came untied. And in the moment that it happens, the cart passes. The person narrowly escapes death, not realizing at all that it was in fact a spirit, a guardian spirit, holding their movement at bay, keeping them from wandering into death. You act as if being dead isn't any different from being alive, like they have societies and structures, Foster said, seeming somewhat taken back and in disbelief. Well, that's because there is a certain amount of structure and order to the world of the dead. Spirits can interact with each other just as normally as you and I interact. Just because you're dead doesn't mean everything changes. Some things, of course, do, but it doesn't mean that it's all for naught. Spirits are able to interact and live with each other just as you and I are interacting and living alongside one another now. It was at that point that a very disturbing thought occurred to Foster. Wait a second. Spirits can interact and live with each other like we do. Yes, Hamilton replied. I just got through explaining that. So, what level of interaction are you talking here? Well, they can do anything that you and I could do. They could shake hands or fight or talk. To another spirit, a spirit is a physical thing. They seem spectral to us, but to each other they seem as firm and solid as another living person. What's the point of this? I'm sorry, but I just had a really gross thought. Ugh, ghost sex, Foster said, beginning to cover her mouth for a moment, as she felt a bit sick. And suddenly, for the first time, Hamilton began to laugh. He laughed joyously. Are you acting again? No, he replied. This time, that was all me. I actually hadn't really considered that. But there are many stories of those journeyed to the hereafter and fall in love after death. And to other spirits, well, other spirits seem just as real and normal as you and I. And if they're physical and maintain the same form, then I suppose that reasonably it is possible That much isn't actually included in any of the information that I've seen, read, or heard about. But it's actually funny to think about. Ghosts having one-night stands. Could you not laugh about it? Foster said. Besides, you still haven't explained why that means you're different. Why your soul can be dead and separate from you and stuff, and you still be you. Well, I explained all of those things so that you would understand what I'm about to tell you. We, wraiths, are born different than regular individuals. Our spiritual cores are separated from our souls from the very moment we're born, that we come into existence. Our souls are never connected to our spiritual cores. Those remain with us at all times. This is why our souls are dead. They are able to feed off of the energy, yes, in order to sustain themselves, but they are not actually connected to the core. Whilst our spirit exits our body, the spiritual core remains. That is why I am able to continue being myself, whilst my soul is out and about roaming.